Sweet. What I'd like to share with you today is what is masculine and feminine energy and how does it impact your chronic fatigue, burnout, chronic overwhelm, etc. Because you may have heard me mention fatigue. Well, you've definitely heard me mention fatigue. You may have heard me mention the masculine and feminine energies. And this has actually played a huge part in my own healing journey and in the coaching that I do because it has such a pivotal role. So I really wanted to just help you to understand a bit more about it. Now, regardless of your gender identification, whether you identify as masculine, feminine, or non-binary, within all of us, we have these energies. And as much as we look at them as a polarity, they actually are this different sides of the same coin. But for purposes of this, I'm going to separate them. So masculine energy is the one that we know. So this also just, if you prefer not to think of them as gender, then think of them as the qualities that are in the yin yang symbol, because that is actually what that symbol is representing, are those qualities that are most aligned to masculine and feminine. And it's very important that we have them in balance if you think of that symbol. So what has happened is, in Western society particularly, we are very, very focused on the masculine energy, and unfortunately in a very distorted way that is disconnected from feminine. Instead of explaining what this means to you, I'd like to ask you to do a little exercise with me to see how this may show up in your life, because for many of us, we unconsciously align to this particular kind of energy because it is so common, and it is also very revered. So we think that it brings us value, and we think that it helps us to feel safe and in control. But as you'll see, we pay a price for that. So I'd like you to just, if you're comfortable, to close your eyes, because it might help you to drop in more and just to access this information. To close your eyes and recall a recent stressful experience. Not a traumatic experience, please. So I'm talking about a time where you felt overwhelmed, very stressed, where you perhaps felt like you were out of your depth, and you might have gotten into a bit of this wired state. So maybe needing to meet a deadline, being stuck in traffic, perhaps needing to get kids ready for school in the morning. Talk about stress. So just thinking of a time recently where you have felt stressed, overwhelmed, out of your depth. And then when you have that, let me give you a little moment and turn off my phone at the same time. All right. What I'd like you to do now is to think, how did you respond as a result of that? How did it impact your behavior towards whatever you were doing at the time, and the people around you? You may notice or already be conscious of a particular way that you end up changing, or that you fall into a particular kind of pattern of responding when you are in that stressed or overwhelmed state. Thinking about what you do, how you respond to help you to manage, to help you to feel like you are in control, whether this is unconsciously or consciously, but to try and bring the unconscious into conscious now if possible, just thinking, oh, actually, I'm often very irritable, maybe. And that brings me to the next one, which is consider what you feel in your body when you're in that state. So as a starting point, is your body relaxed, or is it tense? Is it in contraction or in expansion? And if you're watching this the replay, I'd love for you to post your comments below, because it will help other people to go, oh, yes, actually I do the same thing. It helps us to recognize through others. So, some of the things you may have noticed is that when you get into that state, so in other words, your brain has said, this is dangerous on some level, this is a threat, this is bad, okay, we've identified this situation as not good. So it increases our stress response. We then have these very established coping mechanisms. And in many cases, they're actually trauma patterns. And they usually involve needing to control the situation. And this can be to the point of being rigid or inflexible, where you might even realize you're maybe being a little bit irrational. Maybe you don't question yourself. I was a complete control freak and totally oblivious to it for a long time. And I still can be sometimes. But at least now I get to laugh at myself. And I'm not saying that a little bit of control is not a bad thing. I'm not saying that either, but just bear with me here. So you might try and really be in control of everything. You might find yourself needing to do everything perfectly. You might find yourself having very little, so that rigidity, like I mentioned, is going to be there. So you have very little flexibility with yourself or other people. So you can't let things go easily. It also can't stop. You can't slow down. You might find that you can't complete, that you have to complete things, that you can't leave it incomplete, which is part of that perfection. You may want to really know. We need to understand, we need to have the answers, we need to know what's going to happen. So there's this need to get a mental grasp on it, an intellectual grasp on it. We may not be able to ask for help. We find that we become quite self-reliant and almost shut down in a way, sometimes very independent. We can become quite pushing and like pushing and direct, and really push ourselves and be hard on ourselves. And we also, that what can come with this is needing it to be done now. So there's this urgency, and also often there's a scarcity. So there's a sense of a lack of something, a lack of time, a lack of money, a lack of support, whatever it might be. That's often also present in this time. So I'm wondering if you noticed that you do any of those. And I'm also wondering if, firstly, if you can feel how that might impact your nervous system and your body, right? It doesn't feel good. And also just in terms of what you felt in your body when you were in that place, when you took yourself back there, I'm wondering how that felt. I'm sure it also didn't feel so good. It didn't feel like you were in a rested place where you are connected to your body and where you're going to rejuvenate and your body can heal, okay? Because that's what we need to avoid burning out. But many of us spend a lot of time in this chronic stress place of distorted masculine energy. And then distorted feminine energy can show up. It can show up as the victim archetype, or the virgin archetype, or the good girl who's often pleasing other people and not able to put boundaries in place. It can show up as the maiden in distress who just gives her power away to everyone else and can't do it herself and doesn't feel like she has the capacity to do that. It can show up as the prostitute energy, where we prostitute our worth, our time and our energy, or we prostitute our needs and our time and energy for worth. So we think we need to give and do and just like give of ourselves so much that we actually prostitute ourselves and we don't look after ourselves. So these are distorted feminine energies, and they also burn us out. Okay, so as you can see, these energies, when they're not conscious, the way they show up in our life so usually they show up more so when we stress. We often don't even recognize we're stressed. We often don't recognize how we've gone into distorted masculine or feminine energy. And usually it's one or the other. They're very seldom connected. And we then don't see how those responses then exacerbate the stress response and the hardness on our bodies and the imbalance in our nervous systems, and ultimately lead to further burnout. and chronic fatigue and chronic overwhelm and chronic stress, and this whole picture continues. So it is really important that you become conscious of these and how they play out in your life, and then you can take back your power and learn how to respond in a more balanced way. So because of this reason, I've created a masterclass which I will be sharing on Thursday next week at 4 p.m. South African time, and it is entitled Embracing Your Feminine Superpowers to Have More Vitality. You'd think I'd know my own title. For more vitality, ease, and joy. Okay, so the focus here is to help you to become more conscious of healthy masculine and feminine energy. I'm going to guide you to actually feel what that feels like so you can recognize it, and I'm going to give you tools to know how to balance masculine and feminine energy when you notice that it is imbalanced. So it's about helping you to notice when it's imbalanced and then to bring in the balance so that you can provide the environment for your body to heal, to be in a healing place rather than in this burnt out place of being so hard on ourselves and being in that low grade stress response all the time. And there's so much more that comes from embracing masculine and feminine. I've recently written a post about just the massive impacts that it has to bring more of that feminine, beautiful feminine energy into your life. I'm even wearing some leopard print pants today. I would never have ever worn those before, but more of my feminine has come out, and it's got a little bit to do with appearances, but it's much more got to do with that the wild raw feminine aliveness that has come up through doing this work, and that has enabled me to live my life in a much healthier and more joyful and easier way, and more nourished and more connected. And so I really want to help you to embrace your inner feminine and your beautiful superpowers that you have within you so that you can be empowered to overcome burnout and chronic fatigue. So I'd love to see you there. And also just to say that if you come on live, I will be sharing an opportunity to help to support you to live in this more balanced way, and also be giving away 5 complimentary sessions. So I'd love to see you, and if you can make it live, awesome. Otherwise there will be a replay. All right, take care. Bye.